Welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Will. Today, I want to talk about a piece of tradecraft that was so common it doesn't even show up in the military manuals. That's how to use the two-piece set of the shovel and the pick. Before we get started, I want to say thanks to the Waterloo Area Historical Society for permission to film here on their location, and also to the CWDD Coffee Grinders. Our patrons on Patreon support us with a little bit of financial support each month, or they save more with the annual plan, and that money adds up. We can go ahead and use that to hire crew to travel to bring these stories to you in an ever stronger way. Today, let's bring the story that's really simple, and so simple it doesn't even show up in the engineering manuals. We call this episode With Pick and Shovel. So often at a living history event, when it's time to dig in or put a hole in the ground for any reason, every man just reaches for a shovel. They're missing one element that the Army issued. Yes, shovels were issued. Yes, you can make a hole in the ground. No, it's not the best tool for breaking up the ground. Let's add the pick to the equation. You see before me and Alex and Callan, 3 different types of shovels or spades from 2 different makers. This is an original which has been used, and we'll talk about it in a second. You also see the 2 of the 3 shovels that were reproduced by Bridger Zadina about 10 years ago. And we also know that a good run of shovels has been made to Army specifications from a private creator via the Liberty Rifles order. All of these are great ways to look at it. Let's add the pick. Not currently reproduced, you're going to look for an original, but the Army issued, and it's a good thing to have in camp. A lot of times we look to dig a hole, we'll just dig in with a shovel. Well, whether you look at the shovel that Alex has, the one I picked up, these both look a lot like the modern gravel shovel, but notice this is missing. The metal just comes straight up, and there's no top ledge here. That stops you from having a place where your foot can rest easily, but it also takes out some reinforcement out of the shovel, and it's not as strong. Over my years in living history, I've seen quite a number of shovels bent backwards because they were used inappropriate to what the shovel was made for. And during the Civil War, you could get around this by adding the pick in. So we're going to put a small hole in the ground here today, but before Alex starts to use the shovel, we'll have Callan start by breaking the ground up with a pick. Now it's a 2-piece step, and it's a buddy system. We talk about the infantry and the military being a team sport. Callan's going to break the ground up. Alex is going to go ahead and shift it. I mentioned I'd bring my original shovel out, which we don't know if it goes as far back, but does look like Civil War shovels. This is an option many people use in living history. It's my least favorite of the 3 options, but I still have one. And if you notice this wavy nature, this is where someone dug in ground that was too hard using a shovel that wasn't appropriate by itself. And I'm going to have to take this to a blacksmith and have it heated, reforged, and bent back into shape. Every time we do that, that weakens the metal. Okay, so let's talk about how these 2 tools work together. Callan has a pick. Alex has a shovel from a Civil War era magazine. We're going to use them together. Before Alex digs in, Callan's going to break the ground up. So let's start to put a hole in the ground and see how this happens. As we get started, the ground breaks away, and you can see pieces starting to break up already. We see the ground starting to break free, and if there's any roots from a tree or any of this vegetable matter, it'll break up a little bit as well. Now that we've gone a little bit, let's have Callan take a second, and instead of really messing up the shovel, it's real simple for Alex to just scoop it out of the way and get it taken care of. Now that we're down a little bit, one steps back and the other steps in, and the process continues. One thing as I watch what Callan is doing here, I'm going to step in and give you show you a piece here. That's another option. So let's have Alex break that, go ahead and shovel that out of the way. And let me grab this real quick. I'll trade me. So I wore my wedding ring today, and I normally don't in Living History and in Digest episodes with the support of my wife because a lot of us still choose to. And I'll show you the swinging the pick the same way as an axe, and then I'll talk about something that became a liability for me about 20 years ago. You can grab the pick right here, and as I swing overhead, I can let my hand slide together like that, and that gets more power onto the cut. The reason I wore my ring for this is I did this early when we were members of the historic Fort Wayne Coalition working at Fort Wayne, Detroit, before we had permission to use power tools. I spent an entire day with an axe with that same swinging motion, and having my ring there for that length of time, it ended up that I took the callus off and you can still see the mark. I recommend working on this stuff if you have a choice. Take any rings you have off while you're doing the work. So we'll bring Alex back in, and we can see that this comes out real quickly. Anything that we're running into as far as rocks is broken up, and we make this open real quick. So this is a small example of what happens when you use the pick and shovel together. Well, okay, later in the war, soldiers knew they had to dig in, but you don't always have these tools handy because they're back with the quartermaster or in the wagons that you're out marching. What do? Field expediency, you can do the same thing. If you have a bayonet, and if you have either a cup, a plate, or a canteen half, you have a pick and you have a shovel. So we're going to switch our fellas out, and we're going to take a look at what happens when you go field expedient now. Alex, I'll have you do the pick work this time. And Callan, let's get this ready to go. And go ahead and we'll take a look there. And so you can see everything's going. And there we go. Now take a second and slide back, and how quick it is. The Callan can go ahead and keep digging out. If fellows were working down the line, they might be able to do this all together and could be working. Again, we talk about how it's a group effort or a team effort if you're trying to dig in under fire. And then we let Alex back in there. And we continue to break ground and bring it in. By later in the war, this is a time when the men may be searching to dig in at the front because they know they've stopped. Here's a situation and a style that two men can work together. They don't need to wait for the quartermaster department to come up with the tools, and they continue the process. Well, the fellas continue to work here with the field expedient tools of the bayonet and the scooping devices out of their haversacks. This could also be done with pick and shovel that you get from the quartermaster department. Either way, this is a skilled set that a lot of men brought to the Civil War armies, and one that they improved during the armies, and it was life-saving. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of Civil War Digital Digest. It's a chance to look at a skill that men had living on farms and other places throughout the American society, and something they brought with them to the army and became vitally necessary and actually life-saving. Hope you gained a greater connection with this. We'll see you next time.